are in listen-only mode.
Hi everyone, welcome to our webinar on virtual desktop infrastructure. My name's Beth Rugg from Ithaca College and I'm the Professional Development Coordinator for SIGUX. I'll be helping facilitate this event. Steve Vieira, CIO and Executive Director of Information Technology at the Community College of Rhode Island, will be providing this overview on VDI. But before we jump into the webinar, let's go over some information about just the tool and some rules for the Rhode. So by default, all attendees are muted, and that's just to help prevent some of the noise disruptions that can occur. So in order to manage conversation and not have people talking on top of one another, we'll be using the hand-raising feature of GoToWebinar. Could everyone raise your hand now so we can see how this tool works? Oh, look at you guys are so good. Most of you are listening. All right, great. So if you raise your hand, then that's going to indicate to me that you have a question, and I'll unmute you so that you can ask your question. Another way that you can ask questions is just send us a question through chat, and I'll let Steve know that we've got a question, and he'll be glad to answer it. So how does that sound to everyone? I believe everyone should be able to see the attendee list, so just send me a chat notice if you can't for some reason. We are recording this session, and it'll be available shortly within the next few days on the SIGUX website. So with that, I want to turn it over to Steve because he's got quite the webinar plan for us. So Steve, you're in charge now.
Thank you very much. So I'm glad to be here with everyone today. We're going to spend some time today talking about virtual desktop at CSRI and why we did what we did, what we're doing, and actually how it's changing. I think what you'll find through the conversation today is that this is really a very much evolving technology that we have. It's really difficult to keep up with it. It's changing quite rapidly, and in fact, some of the things that we're doing today we won't be doing a year from now. So my agenda really is making sure that everybody understands what the VDI architecture is and what we employed, understanding some of the options that are actually out there, some of the planning that we did in order to be able to get to where we are, and then really go through the pros and cons of why we did it, what else it offers, what are the things we found that were out there that we didn't really realize until we got started with this project. A little bit about the Community College of Rhode Island. We have 4 campuses. We're the largest community college in New England. We have around 17,000 plus students. About 14,000 of those are full-time equivalent. 1,500 faculty and staff, and these are the 4 campuses. Largest is the one that's way up on the top left-hand side. Looks like a monolith. It's supposed to look like a boat. I don't know if it looks like a boat. That's our largest and main campus. The others are in Newport, Providence, and also in Lincoln.
Steve, do you want us to launch that poll about just people's experience with
Sure.
virtual desktop? All right, everybody. Steve just did a quick poll here that we'll go ahead and share. Just wondering about your experience with virtual desktop. So if you could go ahead and just complete that, it'll help us gauge how much experience is in the audience. Can everyone see that? Okay, great. People can see it. So can you go ahead and click on it if you have a response? This might not be working. I can't really tell, but let me go ahead and, yeah, it didn't seem like it was registering any responses, so we'll just keep moving, Steve.
All right, no problem. What I was hoping to be able to find out is if you've had some experience before, and whether that's we'll find out shortly if it's experience or not. So what is virtual desktop? The biggest thing for us is that it breaks down, it takes the person out of the computer piece of this. What we're able to do is, through a virtual desktop, is offer everything that a computer has, including all the applications, all the data, and the operating system, without having any of the persona pieces that we really want to be able to have for each of our users. So every user has access to an individual desktop, control over their desktop, and the applications and policies that go with it. We use Active Directory in order to be able to control group policies for folks, and we can actually get very granular as to who has what access to what software and during what periods of time. We can actually design it so that a classroom, if we have a very limited license for a piece of software, gets that software during the class time, but it then is made available for anyone to do their homework once the class is completed. So we're using VMware View, and I'll talk about in a little while how we made some of those decisions. There are some common misconceptions. One thing that people say all the time is desktop virtualization is equal to VDI, and that's not true. Desktop virtualization comes in very many different flavors, and so the virtual desktop is not necessarily VDI. The one thing that we found very quickly is that it won't save money immediately. There is quite an expenditure to get started, but once you're started, long-term costs come down very rapidly. The whole idea of being able to replace desktops and laptops goes away when you have virtual desktops. All users won't benefit from VDI. There are some folks that we've tried to work with who just do not like it and don't want it, and in fact will probably never use it. So we've got a small group of population that will be like that for a while. I don't think VDI is the future of the desktop. In fact, I think cloud computing has a bigger impact probably at some point. And the other thing is that, VMware is not the only way to go. You can't go with you can go with a Hyper-V Microsoft application. You can go with Citrix and use that solution as well. So there are multiple other ways of being able to do this, and not just VMware. There are some benefits, and as we started looking at virtual desktop, a lot of these became even more clear to us than they were originally. I mean, we thought we saw some benefits, but these were things that started cropping up as we started discussing them. Obviously, the one thing we have now is more control over those physical virtual desktops from a single place. So anytime there's an update, we can do it, and we can apply it to all the virtual desktops. So that, and we can do it on the fly, so that as people log in, they'll see the latest, greatest software, the latest, greatest patch, and they don't have to do it themselves. We had a lot of people who used to click no when it asked if you wanted to update. We've avoided all those problems. One thing we had is a lot of people carrying around data with them on sticks and on laptops. That's all gone away because of virtual desktop, because now everything's locked in the data center. Everything has a file share form. It's really improved some of the compliance issues that we used to have. Anywhere access is a beautiful thing, because one of the things that used to happen is if your computer broke, we'd have to go to your desk, re-image another computer, load all your files onto it. That could take hours, and really with the limited staff that we have, could take days in some cases. Now we just have you go from one seat and move to another seat, and you can actually log back in and get your work done. So it really has enriched that desktop experience for most of our folks. And on the older PCs, we simply rip out the hard drive, use the network card, and have them log in using a virtual desktop, and they don't have to then have an upgrade of that device. We don't have to replace that PC on such a tight schedule as we did in the past. Last but not least, I think this is a really nice solution for us as far as business continuity, because we're constantly able to give people the latest, greatest software without disrupting everybody else. We're able to give individuals things that they need that might have been a problem if we put it on the larger image. So these are really a lot of quick fixes that we can do today that we didn't have to do, that we couldn't do in the past. And in fact, if any thin client breaks, all we do is come down and it's a 3-minute fix as opposed to a possible 24-hour fix with staffing issues that we have. There are several scenarios. I mean, we can, when we look at the whole situation that we have, we can now manage a desktop to non-CCRI devices. And so what that means is that when somebody logs in from the outside using their PC and logs into a virtual desktop, we're kind of giving them the best, the latest, greatest, and the best of possible worlds, where in their own PC they may have had some issues. We've centralized the management and really had a lot of control for that. The one thing we're really proud of this is the fact that we can maintain the persona for the person on a virtual desktop that we're able to do on the Rhode desktop. So what I mean by that is we actually go to a desktop and say, okay, we're going to put a thin client in here. We're going to take your desktop away. Where do you like your icons? What do you like as your background? What are your favorite colors? And we duplicate that environment with them using something called Liquidware Labs Profile Unity. This enables us to have almost like a roaming profile for them so that wherever they go and wherever they log in, they'll see that desktop that we took off their desk. And then last but not least, all the security issues that we've had to deal with in the past with people carrying around a lot of information that we were nervous that they would lose or have stolen, that's all gone away because we really urge everyone to store everything in the file shares, and that virtual desktop kind of promotes that as well. So what are the big components? Well, it really comes down to what are you going to put on your desk, and really it's either a zero or a thin client, or you can actually, as I said before, take an old desktop, rip out the hard drive, and just have a network card into the virtual environment. The other thing, obviously, is that they can have multiple applications that are all virtualized. So instead of delivering to them an entire image of 60 gigabytes of storage, the entire Microsoft Office suite, we can actually give them little pointers that look like little icons, and they simply click on that, and when they do, it fires up the application and gives them what they need. The compatibility of applications is avoided because what we do is we do very much thin app all of those applications. We very much make those applications virtual to the point where they survive in their own little area, and so they don't use up the computer's resources whatsoever. And then last but not least, we can actually do an awful lot of management monitoring that we didn't do before of what folks are doing, what they need, and we're really quick to be able to respond to requests that they have for services or additional applications or the latest, greatest version. The interesting thing is that when we used to have faculty members who would come in at the last minute and say, we need this and we need it for my class at 2 o'clock this afternoon, we could never do that because we couldn't get into a classroom to be able to load the software or interrupt anything that was going on in the classroom to be able to satisfy that faculty member. Now we can do everything online. We can automatically do it in a virtual environment, and that stuff becomes immediately available for them. So where we were looking at maybe a 48 to 96-hour window of being able to get that stuff done for them, we can now do it in a matter of hours and get that stuff ready for their class later in the day. The server pieces you're going to find these no matter what virtual desktop you use. There's all of these things, including plenty of stuff to do with authentication and authorization and access control to make sure that you can control what people are seeing and what they don't see, dependent on the role or whatever function they have at the college. There are several deployment considerations. I mean, the key things for us is, let me define these things. The user state really is, that you're separating the user settings and the data. So this is really great where you're going to have a roaming profile, and the user state means just that. I can go from desktop to desktop and see the exact same virtual desktop that I had no matter where I sit, home, in the library, at another desk. And so it's really helped with those areas where a computer used to get broken and a person would sit there and say, I can't do any work because my computer's broke. That doesn't happen anymore. The application part of this is really the whole thin application and how you can actually deliver these applications in a very small and very simple fashion. The nice part is that we can separate all these things out. One of the things that was really interesting, one of the tests we used was that we were running multiple versions of Internet Explorer on a PC, on a virtual desktop, and they each ran simultaneously. If you tried to do that on a regular desktop, you'd get the blue screen of death, things would crash, and you'd have to restart. So you really are taking these applications and wrapping the things around them that are necessary for them to run independently. The nice thing also is that we can really be very specific as to which applications go to which people. We really like that a lot. The user session is just what I was talking about. It's that user connection. You can go from anywhere, use anytime, and be able to get to the applications that you need. This has been really great for our students because we only open up our labs from 8 o'clock in the morning until 10 o'clock at night, Monday through Friday. In fact, on Friday we close at 4. So if somebody's trying to get homework done, it really limits the amount of time. We're totally commuter, so students are here when they can be here. And oftentimes when they're here for class, and then they have to go and do a part-time job. So being able to offer that virtual desktop off campus allows them to be able to use the software that they need for their classes to get their homework done without having them go out and buy their own versions of the software. For somebody who's taking one class where they're only going to use one piece of software once in their life while they're taking that class, this has been a great cost savings and a really good delivery system for the students. And last but not least, it's the desktop hardware. One of the things we looked at when we were getting into this was, how in the world do you continue to supply these desktops every year? We have 3,000 desktops, and that continues to grow. We have 800 laptops, and that also continues to grow. So we're always in a situation where we're always trying to keep up with replacing that hardware. With the virtual desktop, we don't do that anymore. We get a thin client. That thing lasts 8 or 9 years, and so we're not in a situation where we're constantly trying to get in there. All 4 of these are not required. You can do any or all of them independently, so you don't have to worry about which one you do first or whatever. And each obviously has its own benefits. So what does the user state do? Well, a couple of things. It reduces the disk I/O, and that's the biggest thing in virtual desktops that you'll see. The disk I/O is really the biggest issue. And so the amount of the applications that you're using are going to cause more of that, disk activity. That will slow things down. This reduces the storage because people will store on their Sky drives that they're using through Microsoft Live EDU or Office 365. It also allows them to, not have disks that we have to maintain on any of the desktops. So we're in a situation where the footprint becomes much smaller, much easier to maintain. Again, I talked about the replaceable PC type scenario where I can move from desk to desk to desk and be able to get my work done no matter what. And that has an implication for business continuity and disaster recovery, because if I do lose a room due to a fire or anything else like that, I can move the entire staff over. I don't have to worry about new equipment or being able to equip an office. All I need is a place for them to be able to get to a thin client, get onto your keyboard and mouse, and off they're rolling and ready to go. So this other thing, obviously, we talked briefly about the security, and it's really a big issue for us, trying to make sure that those user files are well protected. They're much better protected in our area behind a firewall than they are on somebody's stick or on their laptop that they're carrying around. The application virtualization is real key for us. And again, I think I touched on this briefly. It really comes down to being able to have multiple applications running at the same time on a virtual desktop that wouldn't necessarily run real well together on a PC. The other thing that's really kind of unique is that if I've got 2 sections of a course and one section wants to use an older version of a piece of software and one wants to use a newer version of the software, I can actually get that granular so I can offer that for faculty members. That actually has occurred, and we've actually got some folks who, believe it or not, are still running some DOS applications that we're able to run for them as well in this virtual world. Now, it's not something we're promoting, but it's something we can do, and this gives us an awful lot of flexibility. Desktop virtualization has a the hosted data piece is really most important for us. The things that we couldn't do were controlling people's capabilities of what they were doing on their desk. So some folks never asked for a date. Every time they'd see the update message, they'd click no, and so Update Tuesdays really didn't mean anything to them. What we've done now, because of the data center hosting of this, everything is controlled. So we do all these updates for them. They come onto the screen. They don't even see them anymore. They don't even know that they exist. We've eliminated the blue screens of death, and that's one big thing because our staff is no longer running out to fix those things. We're no longer running out to do computer repairs, and we're no longer doing anything as far as cleaning up viruses or stuff like that. Any of those things that occurred in the past, if somebody gets a virus, we just give them a new desktop, and that new virtual desktop goes on from there. Now, we're still able to maintain all their unique requirements that they have as far as the color of their screen and their fonts and so on, but the actual desktop gets replaced if, in fact, something happens. And this is really important for us because the number of people that we have supporting desktops is very limited, and obviously the number of devices we're getting is increasing all the time. So, it's the old adage of you can't get blood out of a stone, and in this case here, where our staff is tapped out as much as possible. So we've got to find a way of being more efficient. So, understanding some of the models that we have. So there's two models that we're looking at here at CCRI. We really do an awful lot of the pooled virtual desktops, and that means that what we do is we take all the applications, we put them in a pool, and then we slice and dice as far as who gets what. That's a really simple way of being able to do virtual desktops. The more difficult way of doing it, although in a lot of cases it really means something to folks, is a personal virtual desktop. And that means that I've got applications that are very specific to a person. They're the only ones who are going to use those, and so we're going to provide a desktop specifically for them that they log into, that they can log into from anywhere, but it's designed specifically for them. So it's reserved for them specifically. Most of the students we have here use the pooled. We have very few people who use the personal virtual desktops. And as far as VM delivery, you either have a non-persistent virtual desktop or you have a persistent virtual desktop. So persistent is just what it sounds like. It's always the same. Every time you come in, you'll see the same thing, and it's almost like that private issue there. The non-persistent is just what it sounds like too. The minute you log off, it goes away. It's clean. The person logs back in, takes the virtual desktop, and it's fresh just like it was before. It doesn't save anything to that virtual desktop, so there's no changes that are made. The difference between persistent and non-persistent is that a persistent allows people to actually be able to have some administrator rights and be able to do some things there that they would keep for longer distance or longer periods of time. We look at storage. So the desktop models, again, for pooled or for private, there's a lot of shared storage. There's a lot of thin provisioning here, and there's linked clones that make some of the shared storage even easier to work with. So you're really looking for a golden model. You set it up for everyone and get rid of the monolithic desktop, so to speak, and be able to get rid of all those hard drive issues or storage of files anyplace else. The one key, however, is that what's going to be happening in the not too distant future is that virtual desktop is now going to get a SAN-less model. And we've been doing a lot of research on that recently, where there are some interesting products that get in between where you basically multiply the number of blades that you have supporting virtual desktop, and that takes on some new memory issues that would eliminate some of the needs that you would have for that disk I/O issue. So a lot more stuff is stored within memory, stored within the memory of the blades, and so it alleviates some of those disk I/O issues that you might have had with virtual desktops. So one of the things when we first did this was we very much felt it was important to bring in an outside consultant, someone who knew a lot more about virtual desktops than we did. And I think it's the best advice I can give anybody at all. This is very, very hard to stay on top of, unless you have a really large staff that can do this and dedicate their time. At a community college like this, we really don't have those people. And so what we did was we brought in an outside vendor to take a look at what was happening in our labs and on our computers throughout the 4 campuses. They gave us a report, gave us an indication of what we would need for capacity, and we built our systems based upon that. Without their help, we wouldn't have been able to set up the capacity planning that we have. And really, what it gets down to is, what do you use? At that time, we went with Cisco with UCS blades. We have 2 of those right now. We have a NetApp solid-state disk. We're using Profile Unity, and we were using Veeam to do our backup. We're now moving to Avamar which is seems to be a lot faster and does an awful lot of deduplication, so it eliminates some of the other tools that we were using in order to be able to do backups. We determined that combination, again, based upon IOPS that were being used per device that were out in the labs and classrooms. And again, that third-party expertise was really important. We really got down to and took a look at each of the applications that were being used, what the patterns were, how they were being used, where we were seeing the most usage, and where we were seeing the most traffic. So based upon that, this is the model that we built. We, for the disk I/O, I mean, I think the key thing is the performance is most critical. It really is the biggest difference between if it's going to work or it's not going to work real well. And I really like the new modeling that's changing the way we're going to do business, because it will really alleviate a lot of that disk I/O. If you multiply the number of servers by the peak read-write, and all this other, the disk I/O issue is really, really big, and I can't emphasize that enough. The other things that we knew right up was that if we didn't have really rich bandwidth, if we didn't have that capability of being able to go campus to campus or off campus to students and so on, that would have a negative impact as well. We have not seen that, and we've actually been very thrilled with the amount. We had an awful lot of warnings about the boot storms that might actually occur. We haven't seen an awful lot of those. What we have seen is that in the labs where we've really put an awful lot of the virtual clients for students, the students moved to those virtual clients without being told that they were virtual clients. We really thought at one time about advertising that and said, that doesn't make any sense. Why tell them something that they might just get flustered by? Let them try and see how it goes. So we removed the PCs, we put the thin clients on there, students logged in, and what we found was that they were really migrating to the thin clusters because it was just faster. And in fact, a lot of students reported that the application seemed to be moving and running a lot faster these devices. So what did we do to the computers? That was kind of the local joke for a little while there. One of the other things, that a real quick story to tell you as well, is that a faculty member who was in one of the labs, and she'd been doing about an hour and a half's worth of Java programming with her students, and we had a power outage in the lab. Power was down for 10 minutes. The first thought she thought was, oh no, if this was on a regular PC, all that work's lost, and these students had just spent an hour and a half doing nothing. As it turns out, when the power came back on, the students logged back in, they got back into their virtual desktops just as they were, and everything was there and saved. Now, part of that is the fact that power was only down for 10 minutes, but part of that also was the fact that they were able to go right back to the desktop where they were when they lost power. So, that's an added benefit that we never really thought about, but it's one that we're, seeing more and more. So I want to get to a few slides here where there's some really important questions to ask, and there's some things that these are major considerations, and I think really had an impact on what we're trying to do. Okay, so the first thing that really hit us was that the data center upgrade was going to cost a considerable amount of money. We had to buy blades that we did not have. We had to buy a solid-state disk we didn't have. We had to buy VMware seats, and we had to be able to buy liquidware lab seats, and we also had to buy the Veeam backup in order to be able to do more of that virtual backup that we needed. And so, at least initially, there was some additional investments that we had to make. That was rather obvious. The software and the hardware were not they were not small expenses, but they were things that we looked at as a replacement for our desktop replacement policies. The second thing we really looked at and spent a lot of time on was the user experience. We really felt it was necessary, and the third-party vendor we worked with was really strong on this, that it was really important to be able to give those folks that were sitting at this virtual environment area the same experience as they had on their normal desktop. If you didn't do that, then they would comment on the fact that there was a difference. I read many articles about the fact that those places that had gone to a virtual environment were really interested in and spent lots of time on the user experience. So that persona, that capability of being able to move everything that was on their desktop into a virtual environment and say, okay, go to any place that you want to sit down and you're going to see that persona, was extremely important. That was great. Of course, the other thing we knew was that anything that would have any issues with the server being overloaded or network capacity being an issue, anything wrong with the wide area network, that would have an impact as well. And so we felt really strongly that the server that we're together and the network capacity that we had were going to be strong enough to be able to support that. And to date, we've been very successful and very happy with that. The last thing is that we had a 60 gigabyte image that we were loading on PCs. And 60 gigabytes takes a long time to load on a PC. I don't care how good the PC is. And so one of the problems, one of the concerns we had was, how are the thin apps going to perform? How are they going to be able to be better than we currently have? And that very quickly became evident by students jumping on these virtual machines and avoiding the PCs. And we really thought that was cool. The one thing we haven't played an awful lot with so far have been the graphic intensive applications and some of the stuff for the engineering department. Now, we're getting ready to do that. We're getting ready to move in that arena. That will probably happen in the summer. And I think part of that is because we've been building up licenses very slowly, so it wasn't low-hanging fruit for us to be able to jump on right away. But everything I've read about the latest VMware View license and VMware itself says that I think we'll have success with these applications as well. We'll definitely be taking a look at that. More to report on that later. The management of this was one of the other issues we were concerned about. This was really a switch in the way we were doing business. We had an operations crew that was pretty thin, and what we've now done is we've taken some of the desktop support folks and put them in a management role. So they're responsible for making sure that the applications and the user state gets delivered to the desktop users. They're in a different role in the fact that they used to repair hard drives. They used to repair power supplies. They don't do any of that anymore. And so now they're really spending more time actually working with users. The one thing I sold my boss on was the fact that, when people talk about desktop support, they're not talking about the desktop device. They're talking about the people using the device. And we were backward on that. We were spending more time dealing with the PCs, fixing them and cleaning them up and things like that than we were working with folks to be able to show them how to use those computers. So that role has been changed quite a bit, and now we're actually spending more time with folks, finding out what it is they need. We're really doing more with technology awareness programs. We're doing a lot more with application development programs and showing folks how to use the devices that they have on their desk, even though it's a thin client. So those thin apps and those operating systems that are delivered through the virtual platform are really, they're much easier to maintain, which gives us much more time to be able to spend with users. Some key questions that we looked at, and obviously some of these we've kind of touched on a little bit before. We weren't sure if a desktop deployment was going to work here. We weren't sure if people were going to catch on to it and really adopt it, and in fact that's been just the opposite. We have a waiting list of people who would like to have a thin client on your desk, either because it's taking up too much, the regular desktop takes up too much space, or they keep banging their knees on it because it's underneath their desk. I don't know what that reason is, but we have a lot of people who are interested and want to try it. We were real concerned about the initial investments, but we've been able to adapt that just based upon the fact that we don't do desktop replacement anymore. We now redirect those monies. one of the things that we could not answer was, are we always able to provide connectivity for our folks no matter where they sit? And in fact, now I can say, yeah, they can connect no matter where they are. And we've actually had people who've gone to conferences or whatever and been able to connect through virtual desktop and get their work done here using the file shares for their files that are sitting here. So it's really been a very, very progressive system in that way. We were concerned about whether or not we were looking at the right use cases. We were concerned about whether or not students would be able to use this, and we've actually had some issues where we've had to deal with a couple of software vendors who couldn't understand virtual desktops, and so we've had to deal with a little bit of that. There's been some politics involved. There's been some questions that I asked that they couldn't answer. Best story was I told someone that this would be the first time that we actually got our money's worth for the software that we purchased, and they couldn't understand what I was talking about. I said, well, if the students can only get to the labs from 8 o'clock in the morning until 10 o'clock at night, that means from 10 o'clock at night until 8 o'clock the next morning, I'm not really using that software. So I'd like to either have a discount and give me back the money for what I'm not using, or let's just make sure the students can use this no matter when they do their work. So now we customarily see students who are logging in at 2 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the morning, midnight, whenever, being able to get their work done that they couldn't get done while they were here on class. Some of the things that were kind of beyond virtual desktop that kind of realized themselves was that we were going to really do a lot for security, and we really didn't think about that. We didn't really have a handle on the mobile folks who are out there, and that's starting to really change some of our thinking, and it's actually made the virtual desktops made life a little easier there. We also kind of didn't think about the fact that we were going to be able to run multiple applications and be able to make it a lot easier for faculty to get their software loaded into their classroom in a timely manner. Those were things that, as deployment looked at, we thought, wow, that was just different, and we weren't ready for that. And then last but not least, I think over time, I think we're going to find that we've been able to reduce that cost through the virtual environment of replacing those desktops. As I said before, when we have 3,000 of those and 800 laptops, replacing them on a 4 or 5 year scale at a community college is really difficult. And so between the amount of time it takes to replace these things and the amount of money it takes to replace these things, we just couldn't sustain that model any further. So the benefits, I really like the security and data protection. I like the fact that people have access from anywhere at any time. I really like the idea that we're not spending really as much time repairing anything anymore, and we're actually working with users and spending time with them to find out what they need and how we can help. So the information technology group becomes much more functional, much more efficient, and we're actually able to give new services to faculty and students that we never were able to do before. We can get to them whether they have a device that they own or a device that we own, and we can give them something that's secure, protected, and not in a situation where they have to worry about getting viruses or anything else like that. Those things, they've all gone away, and so we provide a much better secure and better service model for all of our constituents. So, in conclusion, virtual desktop can be implemented in a variety of ways. Pick and choose whichever one you like. I would suggest that you would definitely take a look at any and all of the three and that I know of, or at least I've used so far. And I think the key for you more than anything else would be to really take a look at what those limitations might be. I think it's important, in our case it was really important to get a third-party vendor who specialized in virtual desktops and in VMware in particular, just to be able to understand what what we were getting ourselves into and what that long-term support model looked like. And for us, this is a flexible, scalable, and sustainable model. This is a place where we're not going to get additional staff. We are going to get additional computers. We're going to get additional people looking to use their own devices coming on campus, and we're going to continue to have people who don't have or have a very limited schedule where they don't have time to be able to get into our labs when they're open. What does it mean for our labs? What does it mean for CCRI? Well, I think at some point we're actually starting to talk about the fact that because we'll have a virtual desktop, we may be able to reduce the computer labs and not have as many devices in there, but instead have a completely wireless and thin client environment where people can come in and do whatever they need to do. The other thing, obviously, is that we're ramping up a lot of our network, the wireless network throughout the 4 campuses in order to be able to ensure that people bringing their own devices will be able to connect in and do what they need to do as well. So anybody who logs in can use the resources from wherever they're doing it. It really has made it a very optimal model for us, and one that I know that we'll be able to sustain because it gives us the capability of being able to service more people and not so many devices over time. I really appreciate what Virtual Desktop has given us because I think it's changed the way we think as a department. And I think when it came down to selling this to my VP, it was a really simple thing to be able to say, every year we're replacing a lot of devices that are really very good devices because of the software that's driving those changes. And oh, by the way, the folks using those computers probably aren't using more than 10 or 20% of their capabilities. So I'm taking a reasonably good computer, replacing it with a better computer at a bigger expense, and they're still going to use 20% of those resources. That wasn't hard to be able to say, okay, should we be doing Virtual Desktop? And he bought into it pretty quickly. So that's the story of CCRI and Virtual Desktop environment. And I guess we're time for questions now, Beth?
Sure. Yeah, does anyone have any questions? Go ahead and either type them in or you can raise your hand. Lisa. Okay, here's a question from Lisa. How many VMs do you have, Steve?
How many VMs do we have? Right now we're at 600, and our expected total at the end of 2014 will be about 4,000.
Great. And Jim is wondering, did you have any software licensing issues?
There's only one vendor that I had a software licensing issue with, and the initials start with A and end with E. And I'll let you guys all figure that one out. What I was told was that we couldn't do that, and the question I asked was really simple. So I have people who are at our Newport campus. That's probably a good hour's trip away from where we are as I'm sitting right here. I have somebody in that lab who's logging into the data center and using the software. Now I have a student who lives across the street, and he's logging into the lab using that software. How do you know? And the person told me, well, that's because you told me. And I said, I understand that, but how would you know? How would I know? And so, one of the, we had an agreement to disagree. We got a call from a vice president a couple of days later saying that they don't support virtual desktops, and I asked if he would put that in writing, and he said no.
Very interesting story.
It's the only time I've had an issue with anybody.
Michael has a question. Did you have to invest in your staff's Microsoft Active Directory skills? And if so, any particular area?
A lot of the people that are new to CCRI came with a really nice group of skills from Active Directory, but we did spend some time doing some training. And the biggest key was the group policy area. That's the way we can actually control and get really granular. I didn't go into a lot of detail, but imagine this. One of the things that we can do is if I have an English student, I can make sure that he gets just the English software that's designed for his program. Now, of course, he'll get Microsoft Office and a few other things, but that software that was purchased just for his program, I can earmark for him. Now, if there's a piece of software that's purchased for an individual class, I can earmark the software just for the people who are in that class. So the granularity and the group policy issues here really become, that's the part of the management part that I had to bring in the desktop management folks and have them work with operations to be able to help build out and control.
Great. And then Becky has a question. What was the cost of putting 600 virtual desktops out there?
So the initial blade structure that we put together was about $186,000. The licensing for the seats after that were somewhere around 75 altogether. So, yeah, I'm sure at some institutions that doesn't sound like an awful large number. For here, it has a real impact. And when we were replacing the desktops, if I was replacing every 4 years 750 desktops times $800 a desktop, those numbers started looking really nice as far as the virtual desktop environment was concerned. When I said, okay, it's going to cost this or it's going to cost this, you can guess which one they chose.
Steve, I'm just wondering, what was the real catalyst for going this direction? Did you provide leadership from it in your position as CIO, or did your staff bring it to you as a viable alternative?
No, it really, I mean, I've got a couple of people in the user services area or user support area that are really strongly behind this now, but it really did start as a, look, we just can't do this anymore. We were getting to the point where we had more repairs. I was buying hard drives and network cards and power supplies, and it got to the point where it's like, I can't afford to replace these devices. I can't afford to repair these devices, and I can't afford the staff time to go and dedicate themselves to cleaning up blue screens of death, viruses, or so on. So I have 8 people to support the 4 campuses and 3,800 plus devices. It was easy math.
Great. Does anyone else have any questions? Steve, how long did the rollout take?
Well, it took a lot longer than we thought it would, and primarily it was because we've got a difficult purchasing system here in the state of Rhode Island. It takes quite a while to get things processed through, so that was one of the things that held us up. But the other thing we did was we were ready to jump into this. Let's just go do it. And the company that we were working with said, no, let's slow down, understand what you're getting yourself into. Let's take a look at what the usage is on your campuses. Let's figure out a system that will be sustainable for quite a while so you don't have to replace that right away. Now, we're in the process of getting a redundant device so that we'll have multiple sources of virtual desktop on multiple campuses. But the whole thing probably took us about 1.5 years to get those first seats out.
Great. And how many were those first seats?
About a little over 100.
Great. Lisa is wondering, what is your default data store size for persistent desktops?
Yeah, so it really depends on whether we're talking about faculty and staff or students. What we're doing with students is what we do is we keep students, all of their persona for a semester. And at the end of the semester, we erase it and they start all over again. For faculty and staff, we'll keep a lot of the stuff that they're doing. But typically, I'm going to say, and I'm not sure that I have the accurate number as of today, but I wouldn't say it's any more than maybe 100K tops of what the things that we're actually keeping on the desktop. And then, of course, the rest of everything else goes into file shares.
Great, thank you. One more question. What is a login time to the VDI?
Well, so we'll go back and we'll talk about the 60 gigabyte image that we used to load on the computers, and that would be, listening to the Jeopardy theme song in your head while the computer was firing up. Now we're probably around a little less than 15 seconds. And it's nice because we're not loading any applications. We're simply giving them a presence out there that says the applications are there. When you want them, click on one of them, and off they go. So that really is, that makes the big difference. And from home, I mean, it really makes a big difference for the students, because I couldn't even imagine what it would be like to load all that software down to them and burden them on their home computers. So that network piece was one of the things, again, we were really concerned about. But when we saw that boot cycle and how little time it took, nerves started getting a lot more relaxed.
Anyone else? Well, Steve, I'm not seeing any more questions come in, so thank you so much for sharing all of your knowledge and your experience. I know I've personally found it very interesting. If anyone is interested, I'm sure, Steve, you're available for follow-up if anyone has questions for you.
Absolutely, sure. Yeah, I'd be more than happy. And in fact, if you're in the area, Rhode Island's a little tiny state. It's easy to find us. Come on down, and we'll be glad to show you what we're doing here.
Great. Well, thank you so much. And as I mentioned earlier, hopefully if the recording all went well, then this will be available online within a few days on the SIGUX website. So thank you, everyone, for your time. Bye-bye.